Down in Bray Cove here in Mesquite Bay, all the shoreline, all the way around Bray, around the little floating cabin here, the little back lakes that run back up into Little Brundit and Big Brundit. You can uh, get back into those areas there. Big Brundit, you probably have to come back around through the Ayers area to get into that, depending on what your tide is doing. But you've got some nice little back lakes that are here that you can get off into those and fish that, fish the outer edges, get back up inside here in the lake area, fish all that, get on the outer edge out here working around toward the point, this nice little shell bar that's around that area. All these areas here in and around this have had some pretty decent fish that's been holding in here. Bait has been not a problem whatsoever. That's the least of your issues once you get back up into a lot of these areas. Bait's just very abundant all up and down the shorelines and the back lakes. A lot of these areas. The one thing that you have to be aware of is that those tides have really kind of dropped back out of us, and so it's kind of made some of the back lake areas not quite as maybe as accessible or as fishable as what you may or may not like, especially when you have a little bit more water into them. I like it around that knee deep to mid thigh deep water in some of these, and some of that has not been holding a lot of water, so we've had to work our way out on the edges, the outside edges on the shorelines there, working the drops out there on that, and that's where we've been locating our fish, and just a tad bit deeper water. The one thing that has been doing pretty well for us now that we're fixing to start sliding to the backside of the new moon and start headed toward our transition days. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close to that. So probably by the end of this week, we will be into those transition days. So that's something that you want to take into account for as you fish throughout the upcoming week. The one thing that's been pretty good for us over the last 5 to 7 days is throwing the supermodels of just about all the flavors, from chicken of the sea to magic grass to the El Gapo. Lots of different flavors in that white ice has been good, but it's good to see that the supermodels are starting to produce it again for us. Of course, primarily been throwing the burner shads and the knocking tails and the 4-inch, and then of course the original down south as well has been the primary things that we've been chunking throughout the wintertime and the springtime so far. And as we're third of the or 2/3 of the way through May, and we're fixing to get into June, it's good to see that those supermodels are starting to really produce for us. So that's a great another thing that you have in your arsenal as well. Again, probably the main thing we've been throwing there has been magic grass and chicken of the sea. There've been two. Another one, LaRue Salt Sassy's been pretty good as well. Of course, your standards in Texas Roach and the Purple Rain, White Ice, all those have been very solid as well. Of course, we've been sticking with our, been throwing the original size in the burner shad in just different situations. When the bite kind of dies off for us, we'll throw those smaller baits just to see if we can entice a few more bites and extend our bite frame just a little bit longer to see if those fish will accommodate us. The knocking tail has been very good. And of course, it's standard in the rogue flavor, heavy metal, and greenback have all been very good. In the burner shad, we've been just had a little bit cleaner water, fishing lots of these areas, so we're kind of sticking with firecracker, mud minnow, acid rain have all been pretty good. And then, of course, in the original size, the twisted tea in the burner as well has been very good for us. So those flavors have been primarily what we've been throwing. Been sprinkled in a few topwater baits and some action in there with those. Double D's as well have been pretty good. So there's been a wide variety of baits that we've worked in all these areas, off the drops, off the edges, getting up in the back lakes, working the potholes with some of those topwater baits, and the Double D have worked really well there for us. Just make sure that when you're working that Double D, you don't get it too deep down into your when you're cranking that, because you'll get hung up in that grass, especially if you don't have enough water to really work it. If you're not super adept at working that Double D, it can cause you a little bit of frustration of trying to get caught up in that grass. But again, continuing to throw 16th ounce jig heads, that's been the ticket for us. Helps you keep you out of that grass. Now, if you're going to work just a tad bit deeper water, you may want to consider an 1/8 ounce jig head, and that's fine if you want to. But 16th ounce has been perfect for us. Very productive, able to control the descent and all those. Again, major things that's been working for us is the majors and minors. We've been catching and getting our opportunities in and around those bite frames, and that's been the key for us. paying attention to what your weather's doing. Where our weather pattern's been pretty good over the past 4 or 5 days, and it looks like that's going to continue trend as we move forward over the next 5 to 7 days as well. But it's always great to make sure that you keep an eye on what's going on with those things to make sure your safety is most important out on those waters. Spalding bite, all these back lake mouths again that drop out of here into Spalding bite area. One thing that's really starting to show up for us is that the reefs are starting to have fish show up. A little bit more consistent now. A couple of weeks ago, we'd find them periodically and sporadically on a particular reef here or there, but nothing on every one of them. So it's kind of one thing that's kind of starting to happen for us is we're starting to see trout show up on these reefs out here a little bit more consistent. And I would say that as we continue to move toward the summertime in June, July, all those areas will start to light up even more so. So you may want to put those on your radar as far as to get into those areas and fish, the reefs, and light those up out there. These back lake mouths that dump out into here, you got some shell that's in and around those mouths and up and down the shoreline. You can get in some of the back lake areas, providing you got enough water in there to fish it. If you like it knee deep, which is fine, but what's happening is a lot of this grass is starting to show up and it's starting to grow pretty good in these back lakes. So it's really difficult to hold your bait and not getting caught up in there. Even with topwater baits, you're starting to get hung up pretty good because that grass has really grown up in a lot of these areas. So if you got more water, take you a shot, get back in those and work those as long as you can. But if not, work the outsides, work the deeper guts on the outer edges of these things, work around these shorelines. Even down here toward Carlos in the fingers down there, there's a bunch of shell that's out there. We found fish out on the points of those things. We found them on the backside, on the main reef there. Of course, in the guts, that as we call the fingers, we've found fish in and amongst those areas as well. So something to keep in mind when you're working all this is these areas are starting to show fish. Of course, you got Spalding Reef that's out here. All these areas here are starting to show some fish. Even down toward Jaybird Point and Jaybird Reef, there's been some opportunities in and around those areas. So you may want to put your reefs back on your radar. Of course, main thing that, again, we've been throwing the supermodels in a lot of the different flavors, just kind of based on what our water clarity is and what it's doing for us. Again, 16th-ounce jig head's been just fine. Another thing, too, that you can add into your arsenal if you haven't been is the Marker 54 jerk shrimp, either the regular size that they've had for a while. Of course, they've incorporated a new one. It's called a popcorn shrimp. That's a little bit smaller version. Looks like about a 2.5 to 3 inch version of that's been very effective as well. So when you need that little bit smaller profile, that's a great one to go to as well and bounce that thing off the shell, and you can locate you some fish in and around these areas here. And of course, when if your regular baits aren't working, you can always go to that shrimp. You can put it under popping cork, whatever you like to do with it. You have some versatility with that. As we come back around here and continue on down the fingers of Carlos, working the inside here, the main part of Carlos on the back shoreline here, all the way back around there, we found fish up and down these particular areas. Bait, again, has not been an issue whatsoever. There's an abundant amount of bait that's working in and around these things. Just make sure that you just be patient with it. The new moon phase was pretty good. It wasn't spectacular. Wasn't what I had kind of expected it to be, much better than what it was. But again, the bite frames were the key points of emphasis that we found our fish in and around those time frames. Did we find some in between the bite frames? Yes, but not as much, and it wasn't as productive when we were in and around those bite frames. So the majors and minors for throwing artificials is still the key thing that you really want to do, and put yourself as much good stuff as you can stack in your favor. That's what you want to be able to do. Shell, mud, grass, making sure that there's bait working in the area, which that has been the case. Matching your bait colors to what the water clarity is, and just going from there, and let the fish dictate to you what they want. They'll tell you what they want if you pay attention to it. There's lots of little subtle things that take place, but you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what they're telling you and what they want. Again, the knock and tails, the same flavors we've been throwing down south, and of course the original super and the burner shad have been good. And what I mentioned earlier in the Marker 54 jerk shrimp, all those baits have been very fairly productive for us. If we haven't found one consistency in one particular bait size or cover, we flip and move over to a different one, find a little consistency there. So make sure you give yourself a chance and give yourself a bunch of different sizes in your arsenal and your bait box, so therefore you have lots of opportunities to catch your fish. Down here in Newcomb Bend, Newcomb Point, Newcomb Shoreline, all this area here, man, you got some nice hard-packed sand. And that's the thing here. Lots of these trout have starting to show up on the hard-packed sand and grass. A little bit of shale mixed in this area here. If you fish this area, you know about this shoreline that's all up in here. You've got a nice little edge that's out there that you can throw your bait just a little bit deeper out there. And that's one of the things that our supermodels kind of come into play for us. We're throwing that tad bit bigger profile bait out there off that little bit deeper edge of that water with that 16th ounce jig head, and just allow that thing to just kind of coast and glide through the water column and let it get to the bottom and just kind of work it off there. And that's where we've come up with some pretty nice fish in there, both in trout, some pretty solid redfish, and occasional flounder have been mixed in here in some of this area as well. So all those different kinds of things have been coming into play for us. And if you've walked this very much or any at all, you know that there is gutters or guts that are in here. You'll get a little low and you come back up, and you got little divots and little potholes that are all over this thing. So it gives you lots of opportunity structure-wise for those fish to hang in and around. The grass is starting to show up on it, which is a major plus for us as we head into the summertime. Grass is always going to be a key thing. Fish love to be around grass. In and around it, potholes, those types of things. It's a great structure for them to hang on to. Of course, your bait fish getting that kind of stuff, and that's what they want to be in and around, so that's why those fish kind of target those particular areas. And it doesn't matter if you're fishing here on Newcomb, or you're fishing down in Estes, or if you're fishing in the upper or lower lagoon. It's the same type of thing. That structure is a big deal for fish, so always make sure wherever you're fishing at, whether you're fishing up here in the north, or if you're fishing mid-bay or mid coastal area or further down south, that you always incorporate those structured detail things, because that's a major player in the game. We've been working these edges out here. Of course, when the water has pulled back off, we've pulled back off in a little bit deeper water, working all that. And you've got all kinds of good structure here. You've got shale that's up in these areas here all the way to the point. You got a deeper point that comes out around that, and you can come back around into the bend area, fish back in here, and that's where it gets a little bit more squishy. And that's where we found just an array of different fish. So we found some nice trout. We found redfish. We found, again, flounder. Even I think we pulled out a black drum once or twice in some of these areas as well. So there's lots of fish that are showing up, lots of bait in these areas. Again, when you work Newcomb, whether it be on the bay side or on the inside on the bend side toward Holiday Beach area, you give yourself lots of opportunity that are up and down this, and it's a pretty easy wading area. If you want to fish it from the boat, you can. I wouldn't recommend that, especially if you're a wade fisherman. That's what you love. So get in the water and get after them. Again, main baits that we've been throwing, again, what we mentioned earlier, the super model, the regular model, and the burner shad, and the down south, and multiple different flavors of baits. As far as that goes, you just kind of have to look at your water clarity and see what you got. If you've got clean water, if you've got kind of off-color water, if you've got dirty water, adjust accordingly. Again, in the knocking tails, the same thing. The greenbacks, the heavy metal, rogue. Rogue's been pretty good consistently for us for a while now, depending on what that water clarity is. But it works in a multiple flavor of waters if you want to just put one of those on and just work it for a long time. And then, of course, the jerk shrimp. We're seeing lots of shrimp that are up in these grass edges and across the shoreline. You'll see these little bitty shrimp starting to jump, and that's why I was mentioning the popcorn shrimp version earlier, because they have that new one out there now. So that's something that you may want to put in your boat or your box or whatever. And when you see that kind of thing, you have that already tied on to your line. You can throw that up in there and maybe get some opportunities with it. So it just one more little thing that you for a bullet for your gun there. So for that arsenal, to make sure you have something else that you can throw. Again, majors and minors, paying attention to what your weather's doing. Pay attention to your water and how much is coming in, when it's going out. Water movement. With artificial guys, wind's probably just a tad bit more important than what your actual current is, pushing in or pushing out. As long as you got that wind blowing, you're always going to have a chance, and as long as you got bait working in the area. So those things are key things that you want to always focus in on, wherever that you're working and what you're doing. So just and the big thing is be patient. Be super patient with the fish. Some days are going to be better than others when it comes to catching. So when you incorporate that into your fishing day, and you incorporate and put lots of quality things as far as positivities go, you're going to end up having a pretty good day overall.